our story begins is it's in the title. The death of Stalin. He dies and throws everything into chaos. And Khrushchev is part of his ministry. He's part of the Politburo. He's the Minister of Agriculture. He's really a survivor. You know, he managed to stay on the good side of Stalin, and you know, pretty amiable guy for the most part. But he does have a little bit of a temper. I think he surprises everybody, including himself, that he's able to then sort of take over without even knowing that that's what he's doing. All decisions are made by committee, and but of course somebody has to be, you know, somebody has to sort of be a leader, and even, you know, and Stalin did have he was grooming Malenkov, Jeffrey Tambor's character, to be the general secretary. But still, everything is supposed to be decided by committee. But of course, then when Stalin is gone, people start jockeying for positions. Well, for the most part, I think Khrushchev doesn't want Beria to take over. And so he tries to gain influence with Malenkov, because whoever can get to Malenkov can then influence how things are going to turn out. At least that's how Khrushchev sees it. So he has his allies, like Kaganovich, Bulganin, but some of the others he doesn't. So he's constantly trying to, you know, exert his influence over the others, but you can't do it in such an overt way. The thought was to never try and, you know, do an impression of the people that we were playing, and rather do our own interpretation based on, you know, the information that's already there. Knowing Armando's work on Veep and in The Loop, I sort of knew the tone going into it. But this is a much, I think, darker. It's much darker material than I think that he's worked with. So I think it's new territory for him too. This cast has just been fantastic, and what drew me to the film is the ensemble nature of it, and it kind of also reminded me a little bit of, like, say, a Robert Altman film, where all the characters have a story, you know. And then to know that you're going to be working with people like Jeffrey Tambor and Simon Russell Beale, Michael Palin. It was just an incredible cast that you just want to get in there and do your best.
He was head of Stalin's secret police, so not a nice man. And the Politburo, of course, were the sort of ruling body of the Soviet Union. And the film is about a power vacuum, because like the cabinet, or like, you know, whatever, any ruling body of people, when the leader goes, it's the grapple for power, and that's what's produces the worst in people, probably. You have a responsibility to that history and to the pain, the suffering that was caused. So however funny it is, and it's a funny film, you have a responsibility to acknowledge that these weren't entirely good people. It was the most extraordinary experience for me because I'm not an improviser, and that's not how I've worked all my life, and I don't feel very confident about that. But I was surrounded by people who were confident, or seemed to be anyway, and also by people from all different, the Politburo and the two children, all come from completely different theatrical and filmic backgrounds, acting backgrounds. So I found this extraordinary. I think we all did, actually. You know, we had, you know, great American film stars, we had great English film stars, we had a comedian, comic writer, we have people like me who does a lot of Shakespeare. it's all different sort of components. I think even some of the details are true. I mean, I'm sure a lot of the details, what tie I was wearing, whatever, aren't, but the basic story is true, and the things that you think could not possibly be true are true. Without being sentimental, we had the most amazing time. And we still have, I'm hopeless because I'm not as witty as the others, but we still get email conversations in sort of Politburo speak. And it's fantastically funny. We loved it. We absolutely loved being with each other. And I think, I hope that shows. We really found each other's company great.
Molotov is a schemer. He was the one who actually survived, probably longer than any of the rest. He was a thoroughly dangerous man. And I think Churchill described him as having a brilliant mind, but totally ruthless, which I suppose a lot of them had. But he started as a journalist, he was there at the start of the revolution, he was Stalin's great friend. And throughout this film, Molotov is the one who sort of keeps the flame of the party and Stalinism alive. He is part of one of a group of people, all interlocked, they interplay, they glide around each other. It's like a little dance, it's very well choreographed. Everyone sort of stabbing each other in the back and then occasionally in the front. You really got to play the reality of it. You've got to humanize these people if you possibly can. And you've got to be serious about them and their situation. We've got to believe that they're fearful of being watched. You've got to believe that someone hates somebody because, something they'd done 5 years ago. You've got to, it's the jokes will come, I think, from us taking it absolutely seriously, because they're wonderful lines, but they're basically lines that come out of, the mouths of very, very ruthless, calculating people. I said yes instantly, because this is a man who's done great work and is very interesting, very intelligent writer who also can write wonderfully comic lines. Very, don't always get that mixture right. So, and also he's quite serious about the politics. And he said, when we first talked, it was going to be a very black comedy, but there was a serious issue here about how you run an enormous apparatus like Stalin's government. What a great group of people. They're all people I admire, and I'm not using that as a terrible old showbiz cliche. I really do. Steve Buscemi and Jeffrey's work on Larry Sanders' show and all that. Just a very, very fine, subtle comedy actor. Steve just in some of the greatest films I've seen. And Paul Whitehouse, probably the funniest man in the country, bar one or two. It's a terrific group, and I suppose Armando must know why he chose all of us, and must have felt that we all complement each other in some way. So there's no one there doing exactly the same performance, or even taking the same attitude as anybody else. Everyone sort of complements each other. It's about a historical period which really not many people, certainly not written comedy about, but it's not much known about now, really. Stalin, there's a few very good books on Stalin, that's it.
Zhukov was the man who won the Second World War for Russia. And so in the plotting and backstabbing and front stabbing that goes on after the death of Stalin, if you haven't got the army on your side, you're probably not going to carry off. So various people are trying to curry favour with me and get my boys on their side. He's just a big bull of a man. I've got this big jacket on, as you can see, I've got like 8 tons of Girl Guides badges on, and he just barrels in, he stands like a bull, he talks like a bull, and he spits and swears like Richard Nixon. Like most totalitarian states, the army is the most important element, except that at this time in the Soviet Union, the secret police is becoming a rival force. So I watch them all in their little groups, and I watch them vying for power, and I know full well that someone's going to come to me, much like The Godfather. Someone's going to come to me and need my help. And it's the least likely person to me, but it's someone that I have a long history with. It's very hard to keep a straight face a lot of the time, especially when I'm looking at a lot of my comedy heroes opposite me. But he's just a very juicy man. He's that person we all wish we were, who says the most unsayable things in every situation. So I've been a huge fan of Armando since before he was on any kind of screen. I listened to all of his stuff on the radio as well, and I've seen everything he's done on screen. And I wondered whether we'd be doing a Stalin-esque version of The Thick of It, or The Day-to-Day, or whatever it was. And he's way smarter than that. He's evolving and changing, and he knows what kind of story he's telling and why he's telling it. He's making a movie. So it's very visual. But he also, over the years, I guess, has developed a style where he knows how to make spontaneity truthful and dramatic and funny. So he's always making what seem like minute tweaks to things, and they make the biggest difference in the scene. It is a fact that this is just a ridiculously gorgeous cast of people who are all funny and talented in their own different ways. I mean, Andrea is a brilliant actress. I've seen her do straight things often. And I had no idea Rupert was as funny as he is. It's not fair because he's so handsome, but he is. And Simon Russell Beale, I've queued up for returns to watch him on stage for many years, and he's a brilliant actor that I think a lot of people won't have seen and watch him on screen. So not only are they all fabulous at what they do, but the truth is always that it's the script and the director when it comes to film. And Armando is the guru. You know, if you haven't watched his stuff on screen, you should go back and catch everything he's ever done. There's not a fake or unfunny moment in it. And this, I think, will be the best thing he's done. It's not a half-hour episode of comedy. It's a full story. It's a big, epic story, beautifully told, with a cast of differently brilliant comic actors. I exclude myself, obviously, all working at the top of their game.
I'm playing Maria Yudina. She was the concert pianist that Stalin really appreciated, and but she hated him. Well, I love Armando's work, and he's just so amazing and so talented and clever. And of course, you know, being a part of this project was just it was very appealing. I read the script. It was extremely funny, very well written. And you know, I loved this character. It was so interesting, and you know, to play a person that existed, it's always it's a challenge, but it's also interesting. And, you know, I did a little research, and I had to play piano, and I thought that was cool. You know, I got to learn new pieces and play them. I guess Armando approached me to begin with, also because he knew I played piano. So I think for him it was important. I think he was looking for a person who could play piano, and he told me that he didn't want to, you know, cut between the face and the hands, and he wanted the person to be in one shot and be able to show the pianist playing. And he said, "Can we do that with you?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. You know, just tell me what you want me." Which pieces you want me to learn, and I'll do it. Obviously, you know, during the Soviet Union, it was, you know, you're taught to love, you know, communism and, you know, all of this. And then suddenly, when it all fell apart, things started to come through, because obviously you're a bit oblivious when you live, you know, in that bubble, and everything is hidden from people, and people don't really know the truth. But once everything collapsed, it was, I guess, there was more freedom, and, you know, books came through, stories came through, and suddenly, you know, people learned what was done. But I think people didn't even know. They didn't know what, you know, what Stalin really had done or Lenin had done. There was, you know, obviously they knew some things, but not the details, because it was all under secret. And I remember people discovering and how shocked they were, and they were like, "Oh, this happened," and suddenly there was like a new book with all the truth, and people were reading it, and it was just, you know, I was a kid, I didn't read those books, but I just remember people talking about it, and yeah, they were shocked. Yeah, sometimes actually he'll come in the middle, and he's like, "Oh, you know, I think here you could say this, and he could say that, and let's just add that, you know, because I feel this would work." Like, it's very spontaneous. He's great. First of all, he's always, you know, he's in a very positive, he has a very positive vibe. You know, obviously loves what he's doing, but he's also, he's very clever. He gives great directions, and he gives directions without you realizing he's giving you a direction.
I play Anastas Mikoyan, who I believe was chairman of the Council of Ministers. I did play him with my accent, and what's quite fun is being able to do that. Everybody speaks in their own accents. None of us are trying to speak this way. Most of the time I do funny accents, you know, that's how I've managed to trick my way into a career for years, but it is a relief. You wouldn't want to, you know, try and do a big script like this, which is, you know, a huge story. And find yourself doing some sort of cod accent and you don't know how to say the word murder, you know, so, or backstab, you know, so no, it's a relief to do it like that. You sense their panic, you know, and the whole place will, you know, combust, you know, if when Stalin leaves and there's this political vacuum, and that's when the infighting begins. My character, McCoy, he's quite fearless, actually, so it's quite fun, and he gets little witty quips and pithy one-liners, you know, which I can just about remember. Oh, here it comes, here it comes, here comes your line. Oh, I'm sorry, everyone. Can we just try that again? There are sort of elements of farce about it, but that's in the physicality of it, you know, the fact that there are these 5 or 6 guys who have to deal with the corpse of, you know, somebody they've revered and feared.
I'm playing Svetlana Alileva, who is Stalin's daughter. Well, I think there's like equal measure of entitlement in both Svetlana and Vasily, because really they're, in what's supposed to be an equal society, the children of princes, really, you know, is how they're treated, and everybody very much wants to get them on side politically, which is quite funny. Armand is one of those people who is, you know, he's a perfectionist, he's tireless, he is very, very kind, very cool, you know, very lovely person to be around. So open to new ideas, you know, he wants to work with his actors. We're in communist Russia here, but, you know, everything's, it's completely modern, you know, our dialogue is modern, we interact in a completely modern way, which is one of the brilliant strangenesses, you know, of what he's created, of what all of the writers have created together. It's actually a departure in many ways from what he's done, in the sense that it's epic, you know. It's of epic scale. It has a real message. Not that something like Veep didn't have a real, you know, huge scale, which I loved. But this is a sort of tragedy, you know. It's a comedy within a tragedy.
I'm playing Nikolai Bulganin, who was one of the Presidium, the Politburo, in a sanctum around Stalin. He was, at the time when the film's set, defense minister. They're an extraordinary bunch of people. In some senses, they are complete anomalies. You know, they were loving family men, a lot of them, but to all intents and purposes, they're gangsters. They have that ethos of they're all in it together. They're so steeped in blood that they have to stick together. Where the story starts is Stalin just before he dies and just after he collapses, and you see a world that is seemingly very secure and assured of itself suddenly thrown into turmoil. And all those fissures in the relationships that were there but hidden under the surface, they start to appear very, very quickly. You know, so it's like the fall of any empire that's surrounded by, that's based on the power of one man or one personality. When that personality goes, there's a free-for-all and chaos reigns. In our film, as in history, the power struggle was primarily between Beria and Khrushchev. And you had allegiances quickly shifting one way and then the other and then back again. So nothing was fixed for a while after his death, but there was very quick Machiavellian negotiating and coercion going on. Working with this cast has been amazing, from different disciplines and different backgrounds, and just all coming together to fill these larger-than-life roles. The way he works is fascinating. It's very freeing, because we will have a script. It will be changing and evolving right up to the moment we shoot. And then we will also be allowed to improvise certain moments. But because we had some time to rehearse it together as a group, the Politburo members particularly, we do have an ease with each other, which has been really helpful. And I think we quickly discovered as a cast we share a sense of humour. Well, I think as soon as I'd read the script or even seen the title, I thought, well, Armando is known for his satirical political work and comedies. I thought, how are you going to deal with this subject matter, which is so dark and serious? And then I got the script, and I kind of thought, well, this is brilliant, because what he's trying to achieve and what he told us from day one is, I don't want you to play this as a comedy. It will reveal itself. The satire will come out from playing it straight and playing it truthfully.
I play a character called Lazar Kaganovich, or Kaganovich. We're trying to decide it changes every day, but Kaganovich, I think, is the correct pronunciation, who was a sort of minister for labor at one stage in Stalin's setup. Everywhere there is danger, and you don't know who to trust. But I think a sort of recognition came that Beria was so out of control that he had to be contained. But to actually form the right alliance for your own survival, I mean, you must remember that, people just automatically, their names would go on a list and they would just disappear, or they would end up with a bullet in the back of the head without even thinking about it. Suddenly, every so often, a little gem comes along, and this is certainly one of those. And we all feel that. I mean, if you walk on the floor and, all the guys and gals are, everybody in every department is absolutely thrilled to be doing this, because it's a joy to be in, and you can feel that. What I think is absolutely brilliant about it is the fact that it is very funny in lots of ways, and then suddenly, like a bucket of ice-cold water down the back of your neck, something so simple and mundane will happen, like somebody saying, oh, yeah, put him on the list, and yeah, put his wife as well, shoot him first, so she sees it and then shoot her. That kind of thing is so utterly chilling, and there is, whatever that phrase was, the banality of evil is so true in terms of what happened, but to kind of put that within a sort of a comic context in a funny way makes it that much more frightening. Wait till people see Simon Russell Beale as Beria. I mean, it's just terrifying.
I set out to make a tragicomedy. I think that's how I'd best describe it, a tragicomedy. In that there's comedy throughout, but there's tragedy throughout. Often the two are in the scene simultaneously. It's that strange mixture of it being so tense and anxious-inducing and frightening that it actually becomes strangely funny in a slightly hysterical kind of way. All of them are brutal and thuggish. Some are more brutal and thuggish than others, and you warm to some of them and you start to loathe others. But at all times, I wanted people to be reminded that even though they might root for certain ones, there's a whole world outside where their actions have quite devastating consequences for just the people. I knew going into the film that one had to be enormously respectful of the fact that millions were killed or disappeared, at that time, right through the 1930s and 40s and 50s. And it's not something you can shirk or you can just neatly explain in a little joke. I think you have to be absolutely deliberate in terms of recognizing that at all stages in the film. There's something curiously comic about these powerful figures acting like bullies and kids in how they behave, really. I didn't really know the details of how the Politburo maneuvered to see who could succeed Stalin. I didn't really know the true events that we see in the film of how Stalin was left lying there in a puddle of his own urine because he'd so terrified his own guards that none of them wanted to be the one to disturb him. We looked around the Kremlin, we went to Stalin's dacha, we went to the parks in Moscow, the great public buildings, and we got a sense of the look. And then we brought that look to London. We shot mostly in London, and all our interiors are shot in the UK. But we found places within London and just outside London that were very, very good lookalikes for some of these locations. I had the very first conversations about this film 2, maybe 3 years ago when, I wouldn't say Trump hadn't been heard of, because obviously everyone had heard of Trump, but no one realised what was going to happen with Trump. The whole Brexit debate hadn't really got underway. But at the time, I was quite consciously looking to do something about dictatorship, about authoritarianism, about how a country can be terrorized by our personality, even though that personality might, in the end, not be charismatic. If there's anything to take away from it to apply to what's going on now, it's like, look and see what happens when the government controls the flow of information and tells you what's true and what isn't true. And that's something to beware. We start with Beria being the bad guy and Khrushchev being the funny guy. And then it's about plotting how they converge, and then how Khrushchev starts to become the steely guy. And I know, not that Beria becomes the good guy, but he projects himself as the liberal, and you start to see a slightly more human side of him.
It's so fascinating for us because it's European. It's not a alien culture, and yet it's so incredibly warped. It's like a culture that we recognize that's just been twisted, and so it's very powerful. You can put yourself inside that situation very easily. There is comedy there, but obviously it's very bleak, and I think the important thing that we've tried to do is not to force any comedy into it, just let it rise out of the truth of the situation. It's the 1950s, and they're a group of lads who happen to have ultimate power, who've grown up together with their banter, their terrible banter, but they have the power of life and death over millions and millions of people. And I think that's what was interesting for me, the way that Jeffrey's playing Malenkov, to have that sense of a politician that we recognize where no idea what the answer is, but the main thing is to keep talking. If we've done this right, paradoxically, you'll sort of think, oh, these guys are people I'd hang around with. And that's the biggest challenge, if we can pull it off, to go, wow, these are really interesting guys and quite funny and quite fun. And then go, no, they're mass murderers. And I think that's the challenge. They are clearly nasty pieces of work. But there's something engaging about even the worst of them. A sort of touchstone, and please God we should be anywhere near as good as this, is Dr. Strangelove, I think, where you have a film that touches a really dark subject matter, but isn't afraid to be funny. At the core of Armando, apart from his comic genius and his inventiveness, is a morality. And he's not an angry man. You'd be hard pushed to ever get into a row with Armando. I've never seen it happen in 30 years. But at the center of him is this moral rage about that people have to be good. And I think that's what motivates his whole political sitcom, you know, the Veep and the thick of it. He's just angry that people aren't better.
The scale of Stalin's operation is so massive. It was a real opportunity and a huge challenge to set the tone of it and get it right. Those guys are really nasty, you know, they're just, not even that, they had so much power. It was like almost unbelievable amounts of power. So you've kind of got to get that out as well. So you did a lot of reference on who they were and how they juxtapose with each other and what they actually, you know, what their traits were. Some of the choices I really wouldn't have guessed ever, and they are absolutely fantastic. You know, the way it works out. When you see them all in a room together, it's just, can't actually believe what you're watching.
The more you research them and the more you see, especially Malenkov, who you just can't believe these images out there exist of him looking completely puffed up, wearing white, and he apparently had a hormone condition, so he didn't have any hair on his face, and or only on his top of his head. They looked like the perfect bunch of characters that you'd want to costume for a movie. They looked extreme, you couldn't design them, you couldn't create them. No one would believe that these characters really existed as a group. Jeffrey's brilliant because he plays him in such a real, like, childlike way. He just can't keep up with what's going on around him, and he's, you know, he's the kid that's always running up the rear going, oh yeah, come on, I'll play as well, you know, and never quite makes it part of the gang, you know, or he's not the buffoon, but he's just out of his depth with the rest of them, leading the Soviet Union. It was never going to be lookalikes. Armando from the start never wanted that. It was trying to get an essence of what the character was and then allowing the actor to kind of take that on and move with it. It was never going to be prosthetics, anything like that. The essence is still Anucci. I think it's still Armando with the thick of it and in the loop being, it's still about the loony political system and the loons that run it and the ridiculousness that comes out with all these situations.
The basic tone of the music is the basic tone of the film, and that is neurotic, you know, uncertain, unsteady, looking over its shoulder the whole time. Generally, Armando's listening is already in that world. You know, he listens to lots of classical music, lots of 20th century music. So we could exist in that world very comfortably and reference all sorts of things, you know, quite quickly with a shorthand. There's a gloss and a sheen that one is inclined to put on things now that you can use all the most modern technology. That's the sort of instinct is for things to have this sort of wonderful modern cinematic sheen, but we've actually again just decided to avoid that as much as possible. Go back and listen to lots of Soviet recordings, give you that feeling of a sort of cavernous Soviet concert hall, that it's all taking place in vintage microphones and vintage equipment, to just really put you there, you know, as much as possible.